So, welcome everybody. I'm Jeremy Lent, and just so glad to welcome you to this month's Deep Transformation Network live monthly meeting. And well, just looking around at the world today, it's only too clear that this current economic system we're dealing with everywhere, uh, country where I live in the United States and everywhere in the world, is not just unfair, it's downright immoral.
Mhm.
At a time
Mm,
when there's never been so much like material wealth. There's so much wealth going going around, the
mm,
billionaires and just so much luxury. And at the same time, billions of people are experiencing grinding poverty. And that, here in the global north, looking at gig workers who can barely afford enough money for rent. And then there's the billions of people in the majority world who are really literally struggling to keep themselves and their children alive. And everybody here in this community knows that things could be so much better. But one of the big questions we're all wanting to ask is what would that look like? And that's why I'm so glad to welcome today to the Deep Transformation Network, really a team of authors who are actually in the process of offering to the world like a comprehensive vision of what a truly moral economy would look like. So back in 2019, uh, the ethicist and Cynthia Moe-Lobeda formed like a wisdom council to help to foster a book series that could actually lay out this vision of a moral economy. And over a time, she created together a team of gifted authors. So in actually November 2024, just about a year ago, the introductory volume was released called Building a Moral Economy: Pathways for People of Courage, that Cynthia herself authored. And just last month, the next volume came out, Climate Justice, Climate Hope, written by Reverends Malcom, and Abby Mohawk. So today I'm delighted to welcome Cynthia and Abby to the panel. And Michael is also was also planning to be in our panel today. He let us know that he's in Nigeria right now, and they've been dealing with internet connectivity problems, and he's trying to connect, and we're still hoping he might be able to connect, even if it's just by landline. So we might hear him, but maybe not see him today. And so if he joins us, that'll be great. If not, Cynthia is here, and Abby co-wrote the book with Michael. So we're in great shape to talk about what we want to cover today. So welcome to you both. I'm really,
mhm,
really delighted to have you here on the
mm,
DTN to talk about this crucial topic, and
mm,
really and personally just to kind of deepen in what means so much to me around these
mhm,
themes. And let me begin with you, Cynthia. And
mhm,
Cynthia and I go back a couple of years. And
mhm,
when I found out about the series you're working on, Cynthia, I was totally enthused
mhm,
right
mhm,
away. And I know that you've traveled all over the world, right? Lecturing and
mhm,
consulting around the notion of like theological ethics. Um,
mhm,
and I know that some of your work sort of interlinks earth ethics to liberation theology and ecofeminist theology.
mhm,
And one of the things I'd love to ask you, just to start out with, is how did your life bring you to this
mhm,
place where
mhm,
this is the area that you're so deeply immersed in, what you write about, how you where you live in
mhm,
your life?
mhm, mhm. Ooh, that's a really good question, Jeremy. It leads me to some rather vulnerable terrain. But first, let me also note that the Wisdom Council that is advising this series includes Jeremy Lent, and he very graciously said yes to being a part of that Wisdom Council, and I'm so grateful.
Mm,
I'm so grateful for that. I've been so moved by your work
mm,
and am just delighted to connect to it in this way. Just delighted. So thank you for this invitation, Jeremy.
mm.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That question is a good one. I think this book began when I was about 14 years old, and that's obviously a long time ago. I saw a film and it was about the horrific suffering of plantation workers in the Caribbean,
Mhm.
suffering imposed by the corporations that own the fruit and sugar companies. And I was shaken to the core by the fact that my food was kept cheap and those companies were maximizing their profit by horrible oppression of people. And I quickly began learning a lot more about US economic imperialism and the militarism that undergirds it. And that led me to some time of really intense activism in high school. But eventually, as I became more aware of the complexity and the vastness of the systems that undergirded that economic injustice,
Mhm.
I really fell into despair.
Mm.
And it included a kind of self-loathing for being a part of, a beneficiary
Ah.
of those systems that were so
Mhm.
awful. And that led to some self-deprivation in very unhealthy ways. And healing from that self-blame and and loathing of my own people took a lot of time, a lot of good therapy, a lot of loving people. But I have healed. And it also was a matter of healing from this sense of powerlessness to impact systems. I knew
Mhm.
I had power to be a good person in relationships and in my spirituality. But when my life was so entwined with systems that were still killing people, I just needed a way to impact those systems.
Yeah.
So it's also been a healing journey for me from powerlessness to a sense of empoweredness. Um, but that journey obviously took a long time. It led me to a PhD in theology at Union Theological Seminary in New York City, which has been a
Mm.
heartbeat of political theology for decades. Um, I wanted to discover well springs of moral spiritual power for resisting systemic evil. And I knew that religion could provide. I knew that religion had
Uh-huh.
been a source of systemic evil, but it could also be a source of resisting it. That
Yeah.
is the reality. And we could talk about that for a long time now. But I won't go there at this
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah.
I did end up writing a few books. One of them was about mysticism as a source of subversive moral spiritual power.
Uh-huh.
And another was resisting structural evil. And that brought me to
Which I
invitations.
have read.
Thank you,
Read this. It's
Jeremy.
great book. Yeah.
Thank you. It led to invitations to speak on every continent other than Antarctica. And what I saw in audiences in the
Yeah.
US was so many people saying, this economic system is horrible, but there's nothing we can do about it. All we can do is kind of ameliorate the suffering. And I knew we needed resources for people to become involved in systemic change.
Yeah.
And that's how the idea of a series came to be. And I knew I couldn't do it alone. And that's how the Wisdom Council was born. And then this team of authors, the first of which was Reverend Abby Mohawk.
Well, great.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's sort of
Interesting.
the story of
Yeah. And
my own life.
so,
Yeah.
so, so Abby, I wonder if you could give us just a little bit of sense of your own personal arc and just how that brought you to that place where Cynthia reached out to you to ask you to author this second book in the series.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. And I've put a little bit about my co-author, Michael Malcolm, into the chat as well. So if he's not able to um, join us, you'll at least know a little bit more about him.
Right. Thank you.
I'm Abby Mohawk, and I'm from the Northern Illinois part of the United States. And I grew up with parents who essentially made it two non-negotiables in our household. One was that we would go to church most Sundays, and that we would compost no matter what. And so those two kind of parts of our life really shaped me from a very young age. Um, and I got really clear that religion and faith would be a part of my vocation in the world pretty early on, and also really clear that like taking care of the earth would be a part of who I am. And so um, and felt pretty accountable to that through the lens of social location and privilege, like political privilege, both as individuals, but then in terms of um, social categories.
Right.
And went to school and first studied religion and sociology and learned from Indigenous and Black organizers
Uh-huh.
in this in this part of the world, and then then I went to grad school and did work around interfaith environmental work with a nonprofit in Chicago, and then went to California where I worked as an organizer with farm workers,
Oh, great.
um,
Yeah.
and felt really compelled by their story and their work,
Mhm.
and their witnesses to what it means to be faithful in particularly really isolated parts of the world. And at the same time, I was pastoring a congregation in my tradition, right around the time when the divestment from fossil fuels movement was
Right.
beginning,
Uh-huh.
in the way that it exists
Mhm.
now. And the congregation I served said, let's do it. Let's divest from fossil fuels. Um, and that conversation started a larger movement in our denomination that that became my research for my PhD program, and also was one of the reasons why Cynthia and I met around
Yeah.
economy and faith, and then I was working at Green Faith, an international interfaith
Hmm.
nonprofit, which is where I met Michael.
Uh-huh. I see.
And and so was writing about this faith-based movement, and I was part of it, and also felt continued to felt really accountable to frontline communities. Um,
Right. Yeah.
and uh, at some point, Cynthia asked if I would be on the Wisdom Council.
Oh,
I
okay.
said
So
yes.
Cynthia reached out to you too, right? And so
Correct.
and that led and so it sounds like you and Michael were really so aligned in how you were thinking about these issues. And one of the things I think comes through um, your work, both yours, Cynthia, and yours, Abby, is this notion of the economy as like a fabric of relationships, which I'd kind of like to explore a little bit more because in from a conventional point of view, some of the things we're bringing into this conversation are often viewed as very separate. Where you got religion over here, you got the economy over here. So, where is morality the thing that sort of ties that in? And like you were describing, Abby, in your sort of path, how the whole notion of of actually having faith and then working with farm workers in California, and then divestment. There again, there's things that are usually seen as separate. So maybe you could both explore a little bit for us, like how these things tie in, and which really I think relates a lot to that very theme of yours, Cynthia, about structural
Mhm.
evil, right?
Mhm.
Or
Mhm.
a structural violence is the other
Mhm.
term, which of course, is like
Mhm.
is used a lot around that. And I think this is
Mhm.
crucial for us to
Mhm.
understand. So love to either of
Mhm.
you to just talk a little bit more
Yeah.
about that.
You're right that it is holding together things that seem distinct. And one of the, for me, one of the motivating forces in this was enabling people to grapple with this amazing contradiction that shapes our
Mhm.
lives.
Right.
And that's the contradiction that so many people want to be decent and good and make life better in this world. And like people in this conversation, all of us probably want to do good and don't want to hurt other people, but, and that's real. And we do good. And on the other hand, our lives are wrapped up in this extractive economy that's killing people. And that is part of what made me realize economies are webs of relationship. What I do related to buying and selling and consuming and producing, they're all connecting to other people. And what happened in my life is people made that very real to me. I used to bring delegations to Central America, and I'll never forget just a couple of voices to illustrate what I mean. A strawberry picker who looked at my delegation of public policy makers from the US and said, our children go hungry because this land ought to grow corn and beans for them, and it grows strawberries for you.
Right.
And then John Sobrino, a radical Jesuit priest in Central America, sitting with us in his office, and he says, in El Salvador, poverty means death. And people are not poor by chance. They're poor because the systems that make you rich make them poor. Okay, so this tells me, and many others, I could tell you stories for the rest of our time together. This and many other voices just said, oh, these economic relationships are ones of relationship. And what I want is for people to see that we're in relationship with other people that way. And I want people, readers, to know that it is not inevitable that we be a part of economies that destroy other people. Economies are created by human beings,
Hmm.
human decisions and actions, and anything created by human beings can be undone and reconstructed.
Right.
And that is such a vitally important thing. And that's part of what we're trying to say in these books.
Yeah.
And they're not just about ideas, they're about connecting readers with the communities of people around the world that are involved in shifting from predatory economies to economies for life.
Hmm.
So that's part of
Yeah.
the relationship issue, the relationship reality of economies to me. Yes, someone just talked about Ursula Le Guin in the
Mm.
chat. And Ursula Guin is the person who said, capitalism seems inevitable. So too did the divine right of kings seem
Right.
inevitable at one point. So
Yeah, no,
thank you for
absolutely,
mentioning Ursula
absolutely.
Le Guin.
Um, and and I'm just so aligned with these ideas myself. And as some people know, I've just completed the manuscript of a book myself called Eco-Civilization: Making a World That Works for All. And a key thing that arises out of the first sort of section of that book is exactly along the lines of what you're saying. The system isn't broken. Like all the people trying to fix the system isn't broken. The system is doing exactly what it was intended to do because the system is designed to be this wealth pump, sucking wealth from people and sucking the wealth of the living earth to this tiny elite. And that's the system we live in. And so of that, and by the way, I think I noticed that Michael may have joined us, if I'm
Oh,
not
good.
mistaken. I think
Oh, good.
we saw that he's
Hi,
so.
hi, Jeremy. I did join you, and I'm hoping that unfortunately, you all, I can't do video. I'm in Nigeria,
Right.
and the network is awful. Plus, it's almost 11 o'clock in the evening, and so, uh, yeah, we're shutting
Mike,
it
I'm
down.
just so glad to get your voice in the
Yeah,
conversation, and thank you
yeah.
so much for trying.
What?
And really, I was just thinking about the very fact that there you are in Nigeria and trying to connect by the internet, which has now become the sort of fabric of the ways in which wealth and people's lives work. And there you are. It's not like you're in a place which doesn't, like where the hotel itself doesn't have the internet connection. I understand. It's the internet connectivity itself is what you're struggling with there in Nigeria, which points to exactly this whole thing we're talking about, of this the structural violence, like that things get created to allow the elites basically to then further their elite power, and those who are getting dispossessed from that are just having to struggle on just more basics that other groups take for granted. So really appreciate this. And Michael, if we were just in each, Cynthia and Abby were talking about their own personal arcs that led them to this place. So perhaps we can just turn to you for a little bit. And here, if you'd like to just share a little bit about your own personal arc that took you to this place of this deep connection between your theology and the sense of both climate justice and economic justice.
But yeah, I think I could pick up from what I was hearing with you saying that the system is operating as designed. Let me be more specific, but let me get there through my heart. So I got this email, I believe it was. I'm not sure, Doc, if you emailed me or you called me on the phone, but one or the other, Dr. Abby either emailed me or called me and was like, hey, I got a book that I'm trying to write and I want you to help me. And I was like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. But then I said, okay, cool. And here's what I got into, Jeremy, that connects with what you were just saying. When I started writing, it started really connecting with me that this system is operating as designed. But to be more specific, it's not just taking from anybody, it's taking from the poorest and the most vulnerable amongst us.
Right.
And who am I if I'm not the faith leader, if I'm not the person that I claim to be, if I don't speak up for the least and the left out?
Mm-hmm.
And so I wrote from a perspective, not just and speaking from the least and the left out, but putting my own story in and really including my own story to tell the ultimate story of the fact that this system is operating as designed. Unfortunately, when it operates as designed, it hurts the most vulnerable amongst us. And we call out in this book those who are Christian nationalists. Excuse me if you're Christian nationalists, but I'm talking about you. I ain't ashamed of it. We call out those who are the wealthy elites. Excuse me if you wealthy elites. I'm still talking to you, even though we can use donations at PJC. When I made these connections, it showed me that we have been silent for far too long as the most vulnerable amongst us have been hurt and left to be vulnerable. And the thing that we often do is not look far enough to be able to see ourselves to take account of it. We often blame the people who are the ones that are hurt. And so our book was a way of connecting the dots to say, no, no, no. We as not only people in society, but particularly and specifically as the faith community have been in error and we need to be held accountable.
Yes, yeah. And thank you so much for bringing that into the conversation because this is exactly, this is so much what needs to be talked about, well, so clearly in this country, in the United States, but all around the world right now. And and I wanted to come back to like a theme that Cynthia you brought up right from the beginning when you talked about your own path. And Abby, I was getting that from you a little bit too, about the sense that when when those who do come from a place of privilege realize that, this can be like this real shock. And my sense is that one of the big blockages for many people who are born into this like place of really unearned privilege, you know, and I count myself in this place. I mean, I check each of the boxes. I'm white, male, you know, grew up in the global north, got a good education, all the different things that unearned privilege just by the lottery of life that allowed that. When you begin to realize that, but it's so difficult that I think a lot of people block that. They don't want to go there because of they don't want to feel that guilt. And so it's easier to just then go with the mainstream ideas. And maybe Cynthia and Abby, you can each give some perspective on how we work on that. This is a big theme we look at in the deep transformation a lot. There's this meta theme we've been really looking at, decolonizing our own internal consciousness and things like that. So love to hear from you about that.
Abby, I've talked a lot. You go ahead and start if you'd like
Yeah,
to.
please, Abby.
If
That would be great.
I was actually counting on you, Cynthia, starting
Okay.
and then
I'm
jumping
happy
off of
to. I'm
you.
happy
But
to.
Sure.
Yeah.
um, yeah, would you mind going first and then I'll
Sure,
jump off?
sure. I the question that you raise, Jeremy, is part of why, for me, I have conceptualized this and articulated it as a healing journey.
Uh-huh.
And so it's healing. It's healing from our broken relationships with people who suffer by virtue of our unintended system, our unintended engagement in these systems.
Right.
It's also healing of ourselves. So healing of ourselves. So to become engaged in undoing predatory capitalism and reconstructing means to be helping myself heal from the damage of, think of the damage done to our souls by engaging in systems that betray our values. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, if I think about it, and this probably would pertain to almost everyone in the room, to be fomenting climate change, when that, to be throwing fuel on the fire of climate change through my everyday life. You know, my sheets have petroleum in them, the carpet has petroleum. Petroleum is in creating the electric car that I drive. Petroleum is all over the place. And yet, and I participate, and my children's children might not have a life because of that. So something must be damaging my soul to
Yeah.
be engaged in that way. And that's why to become a resistor and rebuilder is to be healing not only the systems and the lives of those who are suffering explicitly, but ourselves. So,
Yeah.
so part of it, and part of it to me is also to see it as a spiritual journey. So
Mm-hmm.
spirituality is all about our calling in Dharmic traditions to compassion, and in the Abrahamic and Sarah traditions to love neighbor as self. And we are doing the opposite.
Yes.
So it's a healing also of our own spirituality.
Mhm.
And we can talk more. I don't want to usurp all the talking space at this moment, but we can talk more about the way in which the books build building blocks for people's
Mhm.
engagement in systemic
Yeah.
change. And
Yeah.
that is a main focus. I don't want anything to do anymore with analysis and description and critique that also doesn't say this is how we become engaged in systemic change.
Yes.
And so that is part of the healing journey of the books, to
Yeah.
try to name some of that.
Yeah, exactly. And in fact, maybe I can turn to you, Abby, and Michael, and with a slight shift of that original question, because a lot of your book on is around looking at that starkness, right, of the devastation of climate breakdown, but not by avoiding that starkness, looking at it, but then turning to a sense of agency and a sense of what we can actually do about it. And maybe each of you, Abby and Michael, can talk a little about that. But actually, just to take a moment's pause before we do, just to make sure everyone knows where we're headed on all this. First of all, I saw some of you have already put a couple of questions and thoughts into the chat. I encourage you to do that more, and I can ask them if you don't want to ask them yourself in the second half. But then in a few minutes, we're going to go into breakout rooms for 10 minutes where there's a question around this that we'll be asking ourselves and discussing in the breakout rooms. And then in the second half, you'll have the opportunity to ask Cynthia and Abby and Michael questions yourself. So I'm encouraging you to, whatever questions are coming through, feel into them and be prepared to, raise your hand in the second half and be part of this conversation. But now, just to turn to you, Abby, and then we'll turn to Michael. What do you want to talk about with that sort of curve in your book, like that sort of pivot of where we look at how we can actually get engaged, how we can move from the sense of, oh my God, this is so awful, to a sense of something I can do about this. I've got agency.
Yeah, so I remember, so one of the things, I'm going to back up and it's going to sound like a long answer, but I mean answering this question. Cynthia wrote to the Wisdom Council and said, if you have thoughts about if you'd like to write one of these books or have people who should write one of these books, let me know. And I wrote to Cynthia pretty quickly and said, I want to co-write the climate justice book. And I
Right.
was really clear that I want to co-write it. Um, and partly because I'm a white Christian lady from the northern part of the world,
Right.
um, but partially because I think part of the problem is that we have looked to individuals and forgotten that we all belong to each other, that it's not us and them or this and that, that it's all of us together. And so when Michael said yes, I think my email was basically, I think I might write this book, but I can't do it without you. I
Yeah.
like you have the wisdom. And we've both been in the struggle and gotten arrested at the same kinds of things. So
Oh, wow. Yeah.
help. Um,
And can I just ask, how long had you known Michael at that time?
I don't 3 years? I
Yeah.
don't
So you had a deep relationship that
I
people came
mean,
together on the ground.
I maybe, yes. And I'd been following him, like it was kind of like writing to one of my eco heroes to say,
I
can you help
see.
me with
I
this,
see.
please?
I see.
So, but all of that to say is that then in our conversations, we got super clear that if we're going to talk about how we solve climate change through the lens of a moral economy, that means we have to be unafraid to talk about dismantling white supremacy and capitalism the way that it is.
Yeah.
And both of those things are insidious and affect um, affect us without us choosing it. And they have to change, and they're killing people, real live people. And and I think what we wanted to say and what we wanted to do in the book is not just say things have to change and we
Uh,
have to create a new economy, but we were looking at the resources in our faith tradition to say, actually, the texts are clear about what we can return to. Um, and that we don't have to make something new. We can return to who we're meant to be, which is that we belong to each other. We belong in economies that are sustaining and just. And to do that, we pretty honestly said that requires white rich folks and white folks in general to be willing to let go of what we've been given unfairly so that everyone um, is kind of relieved of the pain of white supremacy and capitalism, and that those both of those things have put climate change and climate injustice into the world.
yes.
So that's how I'll answer that question, Michael.
Yeah. And Michael, by the way, I think has he got disconnected
Okay.
again. So
Okay.
so I mean you're on your own
Ah!
taking us through this. But yes, and I get you. And I do think this is so crucial. And these notions of white supremacy and this recognition that capitalism and with it colonialism has been the foundational structure and the very reasons why, Cynthia, as you pointed out from the very at the beginning of this conversation, the reason our food is so cheap, the reason go to Starbucks and get that a nice cup of coffee, you don't even have to think about the cost of it, is the foundational 500 years of basically of this structural violence, which continues, gets worse and worse. And one of the things that's so crucial about it, isn't it, is that the greater the structural violence, the less we actually experience it. It's like this thing that in my own book, I call it the distancing phenomenon. Like the more the system creates these elites so distant from where the violence is taking place, the more those who enjoy all of the fruits of that don't see any violence around them. What are you talking about? Everything's cool, because it's all hidden away in we are what Naomi Klein calls the sacrifice zones, which are not just a few zones. It's basically the majority of this earth right now where people live. So, yeah, and so I'm looking at the time, and maybe now is a great time to move into our breakout rooms. And as we do so, there's the question we're going to be in those breakout rooms for 10 minutes. And I'd like you we basically take those breakout rooms as an opportunity for those of us on the DTN to actually reconnect with each other, or oftentimes meet new people we haven't met before. But it's connecting intentionally around a question. And the question comes really from the work that Cynthia and Abby are writing about. And is this great question: how might we live if we saw our daily economic activity as spiritual practice? So deep, deep question, as one of the almost like a koan, I feel. And so let's go into those breakout rooms for 10 minutes. Usually there'll be about four of us. And then we'll reconnect and then reconnect with your questions to engage with Cynthia and Abby in the second half. See you soon.
Good.
Yeah, here we are, connecting back again. And just wanted to take a moment before we uh, go into the Q&A for the second half of this, is to invite one of the new things we're doing, and you might have noticed in the newsletter that went out just a few days ago, is we want to use these times when we're all together as a DTN worldwide community to just give a little bit of a heads up as to what is happening on the DTN through the month of November. All these different things taking place that are there in the event feed, but oftentimes people don't even notice they're happening. And so I think if we could spotlight Nia, who's going to talk about one of the fabulous monthly community building events we have, which is the Village. And also, I would invite Sig, if you want to talk about the autonomics that takes place, and if anybody else who's organizing events through this month wants to also just join right now. And really, yeah, of course, because of the respecting the time of our guest and today, just really to keep it to no more than 1 minute in the description of what each of you is talking about. But it's a great opportunity to get people who aren't usually there looking at the event feed to know what's going on. So let me just turn to you, Nia, to talk about Village for a moment. And
All right, thank you,
Emma is going to
Jeremy.
join us too. Yeah.
Thank you, Jeremy. Tansi, how are you? And I want you to join us on the third Thursday of every month. And we will have a meeting on November 20 of this month. But we are called a village, where we come together and we share a commons, a space where we have conversation about issues. We pair up in um, personal discussion. We have larger breakout groups. But the whole idea is we do have a subtle structure that allows free-flowing discussion. And our program includes not only coming together in discussion and conversation, but we begin with grounding and situating ourselves within the present so that we have this sense of intention when we come together. And then we acknowledge the wonderments that we experience in life. And we leave our group refreshed and validated in terms of what we believe in. And so we are looking forward to having you join us on November 20, 11 o'clock Pacific time, 2 o'clock Eastern time, and 7 o'clock p.m. GMT. So we hope you'll join us. Thank you ever so much. Kitata mien.
Great. Thank you, Nia. And let me turn to you, Sig, and then to Mimu.
So it turns out that Mimu and I, on alternating Saturdays at the same time, hold events. Mine are on autonomics. I'm fascinated by a guy who writes under the name Natureza Gabriel and his understanding of the autonomic nervous system. For people who know polyvagal theory, it's sort of a step beyond that, and it has to do that we have in us, implicit in us, a connection system. And modern people don't know about it because lives are so stressed. So first of all, getting to notice that it's there, and then learn how to notice when that's not present and find your way to it. So that's sort of like the overarching, for me, power behind it. And these are just discussions around this, very much a circle, everyone talks. And You can look in the events and see when and where. I'll pass it to Mimu.
That's great. Thanks. And perhaps as we're doing this, maybe Vincent, if you could just put the events link so people can just see the feed of all the different events taking place. It'll give people a sense of what's happening. And then just to turn to you, Mimu, and then we'll come back to our discussion of today.
Thank you. I'm Mimu, and I'm from Japan. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I'm holding a space called Circle of Remembering, remembering, Invitation for White Stories. And this is a space where we make effort to decolonize our minds. And I came up with an idea because oftentimes when we have space like this, decolonizing space, it's usually for people of color. And I didn't really see space specifically for white people or people of European descent. So I said, okay, let me create one. And it is just an intimate space. We talk about a topic each time. And I'm hosting this coming Saturday, 12:30 to 2 p.m. Pacific time. And this week, we're planning to talk about grieving, because grieving, I think, has been lost through colonization. So I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I was just getting a message from Taya, who also wanted to add just one more 1 minute long addition. Taya, you want to speak into the meeting?
Yes, please, if I can find the microphone. Hi, everybody. I'm represented by my beloved cow at the moment. Thank you very much. I wanted to share about a slow book study that we're doing, or rather, the book is kind of doing us, and it's Vanessa Mercado de Oliveira's book, Outgrowing Modernity. And you can find the meetings and the talking about that in the book. What have we called it? Might be called something like book collections. But it's really happening. There's quite a group of us now gathering around this particular book, and it's a longer term project. So it's not a quick, let's have a read and say how nice the book is. Not at all. So if you're brave enough, you're very welcome to come and find out what we're doing there and to join this group. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Taya, for that. And yeah, just a reminder to everyone, oftentimes people think of the DTN as these live monthly events. There's so much going on through the month and in the community. So just a reminder, check out what's going on and get more engaged week by week. And so now an invitation to people to raise their hands and to ask questions or share reflections with Cynthia and Abby. And and I did want to highlight a couple of questions I saw came through the chat, like that really touched to an overall theme, really about the whole theme of kind of structured religion, if you will, or organized religion. And there's a question from Nia, in fact, is how does your theology, in quotes, align structural violence and reparative justice? But also, there's been a question of in dismantling systems, does this include the dismantling of religious institutions? And Ben asked a question, what aspects of organized religion are healthy and can be brought into the new system? And I'll just add, by way of context, I wrote in a book that I wrote some years back called The Patterning Instinct. There's like a blistering chapter about what I call the scourge of religious monotheism, basically, of how monotheism led to the incredible intolerance that has now come just been associated with religion so much the last couple of millennia. And I know that you've both thought deeply about this, so this is not exactly going to catch you on your toes, but it's a really important question, hot topic. So I'd love to speak to it explicitly.
Yes, it is. It's a very, very important topic, and it's very dear to my heart. I left the church for years, and I left the church because I was outraged by its complicity in so much structural evil. the genocide of the Americas, and would not have happened as it did with that magnitude without the involvement of the church.
Right.
The Inquisition would not have happened. White supremacy is undergirded by Christian notions that Jesus was white. The art of Jesus and Mary looked like they came from Norway, and they didn't. So the entwinement of Christianity, in particular amongst religions, especially Christianity because of its affiliation since the 4th century with imperial power, has been so intense. Then I ended up coming back to the church, and a couple of things happened. And one is a feminist New Testament scholar taught me that the word tradition in the New Testament, that's the New Testament of the Christian Bible, is first used as a verb, and it means to pass on. And we think of it as to pass on the gospel or the good news of God's radiant, abundant love. But the word has two meanings, and one is to pass on the good news, and the other is to betray. So in the Christian story, when Judas betrayed Jesus into the hands of the Romans, the word is traditioned. Okay, my mind blew open with that because I realized, oh, this tradition is going to pass on the radiant mystery and astounding reality of a creating force in the universe that is grounded in what we call love and brings life out of death, and is going to betray it. So now I know religions are human institutions. Humans are fallible and finite and betray the good as well as carry it on. So I decided eventually, and part of this was my life in Central America, where I encountered Christian faith communities willing to stand with the poor despite the threat of death does not seem to me to be a big deal. I have risked my life for what I believe, but the threat of death by torture is another story. And they were willing to risk death by torture to stand on behalf of the people because of their faith. So I thought, why am I going to give up the power of religion for the good just because of the power of religion for the bad?
Yes.
So to me, and I come from a Lutheran Christian tradition, which talks about the intertwining of good and evil. So I'm there to find, and it's interesting, one scholar of religion, Karen Armstrong, has argued, and others since then, that the great religious traditions born in the axial age were really born out of an instinct to bring the call to compassion into the world in the face of the rising oppressive economic structures. So that is really, really interesting. So anyway, never should one draw upon a religious faith tradition without naming also its betrayals. So when I draw upon Luther, and Luther has radical economic ethics, he talks about a Christian may not buy a product when the price is low and sell when it's high, because that means the poor people can't afford that product. So that basically counters what we do in our economy. But Luther also wrote the most vitriolic anti-Semitic literature that the world has ever seen. So for me to draw upon Luther, I have to first say, well, where did he betray the good that he tried to pass on? And let us learn from the betrayals. So that I mean, obviously this is a huge question, but that is the part of the way I grapple with it. I've just decided there is so much potential for radical, subversive, life-generating good that comes from religious traditions. Drink from it and continue to oppose, like right now, oppose white Christian nationalism, oppose the negatives in religious traditions. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Cynthia. Yeah, great, wonderful answer. Really appreciate that. And Abby, would you like to add anything to that, to what Cynthia said?
Yeah, I was just thinking about, obviously Christianity in particular has been used to support, as Cynthia said, about Christian nationalism and colonization and chattel slavery. All of that is true. And it's also been used by people on the front line to manage resistance in the best way, to lean into institutional religion and say, look, like we can use this power for good, and that it can sustain us when all hope perhaps feels lost. And that doesn't mean the institution must stay the same in order to sustain us, but that it is also moldable. And I'm just thinking about, like, in the United States, how every religion or every social movement has included people of faith working from their institutions in order to make those movements happen and to sustain them. And so that's the little nugget I'll add to that.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Abby. That's great. And let's turn to Angel, who's been waiting patiently with your hand out. Hi, Angel.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you for the meeting and thank you for your thoughts. And the question is, I found helpful your formulation about at a systemic level and the systemic evil and the structural. And I'm just thinking from a personal experience in trying to effect some change. And I suppose the understanding or the experience that one can only do a small bits, a small efforts. And what I experienced as a quite a difficult conflict to manage. So I don't know, you call it a paradox. And so I just want to hear your thoughts about that. And in your work, how do you try to put the two together, the systemic and the small?
Yes. You name a tremendously real paradox. Anything that any individual does is not going to change the system. And the individual actions of people are required to change the system. So that in itself is a paradox. I respond in two ways. One is, and this is something that the book emphasizes, never to see ourselves as I's. That is a function of modernity. We are not primarily I's, we are we's. So moral agency comes in as a we. So anything I do, I see as part of a broader movement, and I align with those broader movements. So I'm trying to rethink me as not an I. I mean, we're not an I just by virtue of our bodies. Like, we have more than 3 trillion organisms chewing away and swimming away and doing their little dances within our bodies. Our bodies are not I's. So seeing self as a we. But secondly, what we've tried to construct is a framework in the books that see 10 fingers on the hands of change, or 10 different forms of action, and different people doing different forms, all of us doing a few forms, makes change possible that one form doesn't. And so many people will just adhere to one form. And by 10 fingers, I mean, and this is actually, part of this comes from the Climate Justice Alliance, which is a BIPOC-led climate alliance grounded in Oakland. And they talk about strategies. And I credit them in the book and use some of those, but change the rules, which is public policy advocacy. Public policy advocacy is so powerful. Can't change the system on its own, but is necessary. Move the money. That has to do with divestment and reinvestment. What power we have, virtue movements, like Abby led the movement in the Presbyterian Church USA to divest from fossil fuels, to keep the 35 carbon bombs in the ground. So change the rules, move the money, build the new, start supporting alternative agriculture and finance and alternative business and alternative energy systems. Live lightly. That's another finger. That means changing in our lifestyle ways in what we do. So some of the other fingers are build the bigger we, align across boundaries. And part of what Abby is talking about is aligning across racial boundaries. So we talk about, and there are 10. paradigm with 10 different forms of action. And that is helpful because if one focuses on one, you know clearly that that's not going to be adequate. But to see it playing around with the others is quite astounding. And then we talk about change in 3 terrains of our lives. And this one of one is lifestyle, one is structures, and one is consciousness. And that consciousness change has to do with one of the fingers, change the story, which a number of people have alluded to in this conversation, but also in the chat. And someone, Min talked about decolonizing. So decolonizing our worldviews is part of consciousness change. So if we brought up all of our kids to be adept in lifestyle change and tools for structural change and awareness of consciousness change, we'd be ahead of ourselves. So that's part of my response, Angel, to this reality, this reverberating reality that what I do alone can seem meaningless. Yeah.
Beautiful.
But I think I just want to say too that like one of the things I come back to again and again is the 2 tenets that I grew up with, religion and composting. And composting in and of itself can't change the world, but committing to an individual practice can sustain us when we have to be in big conflicts that that take years and years and take hundreds of thousands of people. Those like individual practices, whether they're spiritual or secular, can become these through lines that keep us going, and help us show up for the bigger we, and help us know what it is that what policies need to change and how, and so for me it doesn't feel like a paradox. It feels like you need both hands, and I don't mean that in an ableist kind of way, but I mean it in kind of like you need both buckets. You need both things. They go together. It's not an either or, and that feels really important, especially when you're in long-term deep conflict movements to change anything about, especially something like capitalism that kind of refuses to go away. But we need both.
Wow, thank you. Yeah, great answer, really comprehensive there. And let's turn to Susan, and just looking at the time now, we have a couple more questions after that. So let's keep both the question and the answer fairly succinct so we can stay on time. Over to you, Susan. Great to see you.
Okay, great to see you too, Jeremy. I love this talk. I'm actually giving a talk on regenerative economics at a church I attend this month. So this is very timely for me. Actually, to be honest, you answered a lot of my question. I was thinking about, first of all, I resonate with everything you say about changing the story and subsequently the future. David Corton has a book about that as well.
Yes. Yes.
And so my question was what you were kind of looking at, which is some of the, let's call it the low-hanging fruit of how we take this growing awareness, this growing knowledge, this shift in perception, and turn it into easily manifestable. Well, I don't want to say easily, but action we can manifest that takes us outside the capitalist economy. So you may have already answered that. Like I also added cooperative economic models, publicly owned banks, and energy, which you mentioned.
Yes.
So that was kind of what I was interested in too, was just sort of outlining some of those things that people can say, oh, okay, I can participate in that.
Yes. And Susan, I think what you've said is really important. And what you just said, cooperative economics and public banking and local banking and local finance, these are all parts of what we would call build the new. And that can be a low-hanging fruit because yes, one can seek those out. My family decades ago, took our money out of regular banks and put them in local banks that reinvest in minority communities, and minority projects in our own community. But you're right that building the new, engaging in these regenerative economic systems and agricultural systems, supporting local agriculture. These are vitally important. It will, someone is going to say, but that's not going to change the world. Okay, they're right. It's not, but it's essential. It's essential. And along with it, we do other things. We do like the kind of public policy changes that make tax breaks so that local agriculture can grow. So yes, yes to you. And to let those, it became so clear to me once when I was watching a cellist. And I thought, my God, what a human hand can do. Those 10 fingers playing that cello are like transcendent. But one finger alone couldn't play the cello.
Yeah.
So one finger on the hands of change is not going to undo predatory economies. But working all together, it's another story. But what you say, or what Abby said, reminded me also that one of the things we do is we end each chapter with a section called Honoring our bodies. So a bodily practice. And that might be something like daily composting or breathing exercises. And we end each chapter with Sacred Journey Journal, which are some prompts just for helping us recognize the sacredness of the journey towards economic lives. Yeah. So I think those are important dimensions of change.
Great question. And I just looking at the time, just wanted to check with you, Abby and Cynthia. Are you able to stay around for just a few more minutes so we can get these other last two questions
I can stay for like 2 minutes, and then I have a commitment to my family that I have to be present for. But I will be here.
Yeah, so let's and thanks for spotlighting both John and Carmen. And so let's hear from you, Carmen, and then John. Maybe you can just ask your question real quick, each both before we even get a response, so we can just hold that.
And Abby can respond first because she has to leave.
That sounds great. And also, let me just ask Andrew Gaines to be spotlighted. I know Andrew had asked if he could just mention evolutionary catalysts around this same theme that Cynthia's been talking about. So let's just bring that into the conversation before it's over. But yeah, let's have these questions and then turn to Abby before we lose you, Abby. So Carmen.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody, and Jeremy, especially, and your team, and the guests. When we went to the breakout room, Jeremy, you sent us out with a question. And the question was, how does this new economy reflect it as a spiritual practice? What does it have to do with a spiritual practice? And that's the question that I want to ask. I want to specifically address it in two areas of our money behaviors. How we invest our money and how we give away our money. Okay, those two areas. How do they become a spiritual practice so that we don't continue to damage our souls by engaging in behaviors that are opposed to our values?
Great, thank you. Great question, Carmen. And then let's hear John's question, and then we'll turn to you, Abby, to respond to those, and then to Andrew, and then to Cynthia. So, John.
Okay, thank you very much. I mentioned this to you, Jeremy, at the Cobb Institute, but I've been following a different thread of partly probably because of my profession of being a social worker for many years with children and families, and a psychotherapist, and seeing so much suffering that relates to objectification and sexual desire and control and dominator hierarchies within families, and how much sexual urge itself is a kind of dominator hierarchy, which controls a lot of human behavior, because there's so little real education about it and awareness. So I've been sort of seeing that, I suppose, more as a root cause, that we can change a lot of other things, but unless we really do something about how aware we are of managing or not managing our sexual desire, then there's a real sort of flaw in the whole system.
Thank you. Thank you, John, for bringing that in. Let's turn to you, Abby, before we and just hear what your thoughts.
I'm going to be thinking about John's question for a while, but I actually think, Dr. Carmen, the question that you raised is the question that I have felt really connected to and committed to for the last decade or so. Like that it's not just a trivial afterthought that we think about where our money is. Like both investments and what we buy, but like that is core to who we are, especially those of us who have things like investments. And in my own community, part of the question that I've posed is that we can't be Christian if we are spending money on things that are antithetical to our faith, like fossil fuels. And that in doing so, we commit not just sins against the earth, but against ourselves. And that's the language of my tradition. But I think this question of how we spend our money, what we invest in, it's not a side question. It's core, and I really appreciate you raising that question.
Great, thanks, Abby. Well, I know we're going to have to say goodbye to you, Abby. So I just wanted to thank you so much from my heart. This has been so great to have your voice in this, and thanks so much for the book on climate justice that you published, and everybody knows. And I'll be putting on there when I post the recording. You'll have a link to be able to buy that book, so you can follow up on that. So thank you. But
Thank
we'll
you.
keep you, if you're okay, Cynthia, for just a couple minutes.
Yes, absolutely. Goodbye, dear Abby.
Bye. And I'll turn to you, Andrew, because I know when we're talking about some of the particular ways to get engaged in a systemic way, you had something to add about evolutionary catalysts. If you could just keep it to like a 1 minute sort of highlight, just to respect Cynthia's time, that would be great. But let's hear from you about that, Andrew.
Yes. I'm with Stable Planet Alliance. We have set up a League of Evolutionary Catalysts. And the role of an evolutionary catalyst is to talk personally with friends, neighbors, business colleagues, and potentially influencers about the things we're talking about here, the interconnected system. It helps have a positive goal. Jeremy talks about a life-affirming culture. That's a wonderful phrasing for it, eco-civilization. We champion a compassionate, ecologically sustainable world. It's all the same thing. But the key thing is to empower ordinary people as communicators in their own right.
That's perfect. Thank you, Andrew. And if you could put a link in the chat, that would be great, so people can follow up on that. Well, thanks. And so, as we're a little bit over time, let me turn back to you, Cynthia, for some final words. Before we do that, I just wanted to give everyone the heads up that on Thursday at 10 a.m. Pacific, there'll be the opportunity, as we always have, for a circle of practice for people who want to take these themes and just hold them together in a smaller group circle, with a more kind of spiritual orientation around that. That's the opportunity there for you. So please click on that link and be prepared to join that. And let's go now to you, Cynthia, if you want to just both answer some of those questions that got asked, and then give us some final words to, like, what can we take away from this overall session?
Well, in response to Dr. Carmen, how our financial and monetary practices can be spiritual practices. To me, one way to respond to that is to ask the question about where I put my money. And that is money that I might save or money that I might spend. And the question is this going to serve neighbor love or betray it? And by neighbor love, I mean, in my tradition, it means serve the well-being of the neighbor. And if systemic injustice is trampling on the neighbor, seek to undo it. So will my investment serve neighbor love or betray it? Or will my purchasing of this item do that or not? One cannot spend one's life being pure in that way. That would take every moment of one lived. You know, am I getting the right toothpaste? Whatever. But that as a guiding principle renders it a spiritual practice. because the great call of spirituality is to cultivate capacity to love. So our financial practices cultivate or disrupt our capacity to love. The question, it was Andrew that spoke about people talking with each other. Yes, bringing this into everyday conversation so that my conversations with my neighbors, my family would have to do with this, is being a catalyst in that way is vitally important. The question of how this all relates to managing sexual urges, that seems to me to be a brilliant question and a very good one. I haven't thought about it enough. But I do know that I would put those sexual urges in the category of life can be curved in on self and one's own desires, one's own perceived needs, or life can be curved out to serve the well-being of a whole. And one of the great roles of religious traditions is supposed to be to uncurve us from self into serving a broader whole. And I would say that that is also one of the dimensions of learning to understand and manage for the good sexual urges. But again, I have to think more about that question. In terms of any final comments, I would say I do hope people get the books, and I do hope people take advantage of the opportunity to do honoring our bodies and sacred journey journals mixed with as a dimension of systemic change. But I think the thing that I would add is one of the other things that I try to emphasize in the book is the incredible power of beauty and awe and joy. And that one of the fingers on the hands of change is actually cultivate gratitude, awe, holy anger, and grief. So to practice grief at what's going on and holy anger at what's going on and awe at the stunning beauty around us and gratitude for every moment of being able to breathe on this splendid garden is quite amazing. What I suggest to my students to do is to take a beauty bath every day. And a beauty bath is to take some moments, even if just a couple, to be astounded by the sensuous beauty that is right there with you, like the feeling of a breeze on your skin when you walk outside the door, or the sight of the sky in the evening. These things feed your soul, but it's easy to ignore them. So, as I see it, we are such sensuous creatures that is given for incredible pleasure through our senses. We might as well relish it, whatever this great mystery that some people call God or some people call the energy of the cosmos is somehow it is stunningly an artist. Or as I read the other day, one ancient theologian said the earth is God's harp. So let's listen to the music and enjoy the beauty and let that feed our souls for the great journey before us, the great work of our time, to build ways of living together that the earth can sustain and that enable people to live with justice and joy. Yeah.
Cynthia, thank you so much for leaving us on this note and just taking that in. And so grateful for all that you bring into the world and for this book series and for what Abby and Michael have done. And this is a great contribution to what we're all working on. And just my gratitude and look forward to more in the future here on the DTN.
Thank you. Thank you so much. But I thank everyone in this room for the work of the Deep Transformation Network and for the minds, the hearts, the bodies that are going into it. I am grateful.
Yeah. Okay. And see you all during the week, and hopefully some of you can make it to the Thursday session. And until next time, thank you, thank you, Cynthia, thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you, Jeremy. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Jeremy.